Billy Porter stood in the wings of the Playhouse Theatre in London, heart thundering like a runaway train. The curtain remained closed, hiding the transformed Kit Kat Club from view, but he could already feel the electricity of the audience charging the air. Somewhere beyond that velvet partition, a crowd of eager theatergoers clutched champagne flutes, whispered in French-accented English, and fanned themselves in anticipation. They had heard the buzz. Billy Porter, Broadway legend, Emmy-winning chameleon of stage and screen, was making his West End debut as the MC in Cabaret. The role had been carried by some of the greatest actors of our time, and now it was his turn. He caught his reflection in a small mirror mounted above the dressing table, the elaborate makeup, the glittering black corset tracing the curve of his ribs, the silk stockings shimmering under the warm dressing room lights, and most striking of all, the tiny top hat perched at a jaunty angle. He leaned forward, studying every detail. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. The nerves of opening night felt no different than those he had experienced 50 shows into opening night on Broadway. The stakes were inevitably higher, though, a new city, new critics, a fresh slate of opinions. Billy pressed a finger gently to his temple, recalled his coach's words, "Nerves tell you that you still care. Harness them." He exhaled, imagining he was exhaling into the lungs of the MC himself, that deliciously unhinged character whose purpose was to seduce, to unsettle, to shine a spotlight on the darkness looming beneath shattered glamour. But before the MC came the man, the actor, the immigrant to a foreign stage, still discovering how to conquer self-doubt amid adoring crowds. From downstage, he caught snippets of the overture, soft chords of Will Coleman, drifting through the proscenium. The orchestra's tuning, the breathy shuffle of the ensemble slipping into character. The world he was about to enter was equal parts decadent dream and creeping nightmare. It was Berlin in the early 1930s, but as staged in a London theatre, it also felt like the fragile dream of every outsider who dared to ask for more than society would easily grant. Behind him, the stage manager's voice crackled over the headset. "Places in 2, 1, Billy pushed off the wall, lifted his chin, and began to move towards center wing. His right hand brushed against the lush velvet of the curtain. He paused for a heartbeat, closed his eyes, and whispered the MC's opening line under his breath. "Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome." Then he tapped his thigh twice, the signal that he was ready. The curtain rose. The lights bathed him in a spotlight glow so warm it felt like a second skin. The audience exhaled in unison. The hush was almost deafening. He opened his mouth, and the familiar melody spilled out, but this time it carried a new weight. He welcomed them not just to the Kit Kat Club, but to whatever they brought in their hearts that night: hopes, sins, secrets, rebellions. The applause that followed was thunderous, a tidal wave of approval that rippled through the theater. Part of him wanted to revel in that applause, to raise his arms and drink in the adulation. But the MC never lingers. With a sly grin, he dropped his arms, transitioned seamlessly into the next number, and let the music transform him. The choreography, precise but infused with his improvisational spark, carried him across the stage. He tipped his top hat to a row of seats on the left, then the right, making personal connections with strangers who would never know their names but would remember his glinting eye contact for years. Even as the audience laughed at his winks, shivered at his darker asides, and swayed to the rhythm of each song, Billy felt the nerves coil and uncoil inside him, a living thing. During the scene where he taunts the bourgeois couple perched at a table center stage, he leaned close to the actors playing Sally Bowles and Clifford Bradshaw, whispering his lines with wicked delight. The intimacy of the Kit Kat Club production meant he was never more than a foot away from any patron, and their gasps and giggles were tangible, immediate. The pressure was immense, but also intoxicating. Between numbers, the MC's patter crackled like fine champagne, cutting through the tension with jokes that skated on the edge of propriety. Billy reveled in molding the audience's mood, alternately playful, flirtatious, ominous. At one point, he plucked a hand from a woman in the front row and dangled it above his head like a prize, eliciting delighted screams. Then, with a dramatic flourish, he tossed the glove back to her, never breaking eye contact. Moments like that were why he had done it. The connection between actor and audience, a silent pact that anything might happen, that they were all discovering something together. But backstage, the aftertaste of each high note lingered as both triumph and challenge. Could he dig even deeper? Could he find another layer to the MC's bravado? With each performance, he planned to unearth something fresh. That's what kept him alive on stage. As the first act neared its close, Billy guided the audience into a bittersweet farewell for intermission. He tipped his hat one last time, gave a sly bow, and, as the curtain fell, allowed himself a brief smile. The roar of applause followed him off stage. Back in the wings, he sank onto a chair, pulled off the hat, and rested his head in his hands. For a moment, the actor Billy Porter re-emerged, heart still racing, mind alive with every cheer and gasp. The MC could wait. He let the adrenaline wash over him, a reminder that every debut, no matter how seasoned the performer, left room for discovery. As he rose to head back into the dressing room for a sip of water, he felt something settle in his chest. Pride, yes, but also gratitude. He had made it, but more than that, he had survived his nerves, and turned them into magic. Night after night, the Kit Kat Club became Billy Porter's realm, a gritty, glittering universe where he was both ringmaster and trickster, provocateur and prophet. The intimacy of the space blurred the line between audience and actor. There were no barriers, no distance, no velvet ropes to shield him from their eyes. That was the challenge. That was the thrill. Billy had always thrived on big stages, the thunder of Broadway houses, the cinematic eye of Emmy-winning roles, but there was something raw, almost dangerous, about this production. The Playhouse Theater had been entirely reimagined for cabaret, candlelit tables, velvet banquettes, catwalks threading through the crowd-like veins of a dark cabaret dream. Audience members became part of the story. Their reactions were folded into the rhythm of the show. Sometimes they leaned forward, drawn in by the seduction of the spectacle. Sometimes they recoiled, a perfectly timed gasp when Billy let the MC's darker edges gleam through the makeup. Each night, the show lived and breathed differently. And Billy embraced that. He thrived in the unpredictability. But it wasn't easy. Between acts, in the brief slivers of quiet backstage, he often collapsed into a chair, breath heaving, makeup smeared with sweat, heart pounding like a snare drum. The physical toll of the performance was intense, dancing, singing, acting, shifting tones from comedy to menace in a heartbeat. But it was the emotional intensity that stayed with him long after the curtain fell. The MC wasn't just a flamboyant narrator. In Billy's hands, he became a mirror, for the characters, for the audience, and for society itself. He was the laugh before the collapse, the glitter before the storm. And he knew, acutely, that playing this role as a black, queer American man on a historically white West End stage was radical, transformative, vulnerable. Some nights, when the house lights came up and the audience thundered their approval, he allowed himself a flicker of satisfaction. But then came the whispers. Online comments. Headlines that questioned whether his performance was too stylized, too political, too American. And while Billy had long grown a thick skin in the industry, those critiques still lodged in the corners of his mind. One particular night, after a haunting rendition of I Don't Care Much, he retreated to his dressing room in silence. That song, a melancholic, almost broken confession of apathy, always left him raw. On that night, the final note had hung in the air like a ghost. The theater had been so still it was as if the audience had stopped breathing. He had given them his soul. And yet backstage, under the harsh glow of a vanity mirror, he read a social media comment that said, "Porter's MC feels like it belongs in a different show." It shouldn't have stung, but it did. He sighed, reaching for his water bottle, when a knock came at the door. A crew member handed him a folded piece of paper. It was a note from a young man who had left it with an usher on his way out. "I came tonight not knowing what to expect. I thought I'd be entertained, but I wasn't ready to be seen. Your performance, your presence, made me feel possible. Thank you." Billy stared at the note for a long moment. Then he folded it again, gently, and tucked it into his wallet. That, he reminded himself, was why he was here. Not for unanimous praise. Not to be safe. But to push, to challenge, to open doors. Just as others had done for him. As the weeks passed, the conversation around his performance began to shift. Word of mouth grew louder. Celebrities quietly slipped into the back row. Critics returned a second and third time, and their reviews softened, then sparkled. Standing ovations became routine. Theatergoers began dressing like characters from the show, mimicking Billy's MC style: velvet jackets, smeared eyeliner, confidence worn like armor. London was beginning to understand not just what he was doing, but why. What set his MC apart wasn't just the sass, or the sparkle, or even the menace. It was the history behind it, Billy's own story infused into every line. When he strutted across the stage in thigh-high boots, he carried generations of queer performers denied their place in the spotlight. When he cracked a wicked joke or locked eyes with a patron sipping wine in a tuxedo, he did so with centuries of coded performance behind him. Every smirk, every wink, every lament was layered. And it was working. On a rainy Wednesday matinee, after a particularly charged performance, a middle-aged couple waited near the stage door. When Billy emerged, trench coat over his costume, umbrella in hand, they stepped forward with tears in their eyes. "We've seen this show 5 times over the years," the woman said, voice trembling. "But tonight, it finally made sense." Billy smiled, bowed his head, and simply said, "Thank you for seeing me." That night, he stood again in the wings as the overture began. The nerves were still there, not as panic, but as energy. Purpose. A reminder that every performance mattered. That every eye in the room deserved his truth. He stepped into the light, top hat tilted, lips curled into a knowing grin. The applause started before he even spoke. And with one outstretched arm and a voice like velvet, he began again. "Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome." And the magic continued.